Chapter 10 of the Enchanted Barn. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gail Mattern. The Enchanted Barn by Grace Livingston Hill. Chapter 10. The crisis was precipitated by Shirley's finding her mother crying when she came up softly to see her. "Now, little mother dear, what can be the matter?" she cried aghast, sitting down on the bed and drawing her mother's head into her lap. But it was some time before Mrs. Hollister could recover her calmness, and Shirley began to be frightened. At last, when she had kissed and petted her, she called down to the others to come upstairs quickly. They came with all haste, George and Harley with dish towels over their shoulders, Carol with her arithmetic and pencil, little Doris trudging up breathless one step at a time, and all crying excitedly, "What's the matter?" "Why, here's our blessed little mother lying here all by herself, crying because she doesn't know where in the world we can find a house," cried Shirley. "And I think it's time we told our beautiful secret, don't you?" "Yes!" chorused the children, although Harley and Doris had no idea until then that there was any beautiful secret. Beautiful secrets hadn't been coming their way. "Well, I think we better tell it," said Shirley, looking at George and Carol questioningly. "Don't you? We don't want mother worrying." So they all clustered around her on the bed and the floor and sat expectantly while Shirley told. "You see, mother, it's this way. We've been looking around a good deal lately, George and I, and we haven't found a thing in the city that would do. So one day I took a trolley ride out of the city, and I've found something I think will do nicely for the summer anyway, and that will give us time to look around and decide. Mother dear, would you mind camping so very much if we made you a nice, comfortable place?" "Camping!" said Mrs. Hollister in dismay. "Dear child, in a tent?" "No, mother, not in a tent. There's a sort of a house. That is, there's a building where we could sleep and put our furniture and all. But there's a lovely out of doors. Wouldn't you like that for Doris and you?" "Oh, yes," sighed the poor woman. "I'd like it, but, child, you haven't any idea what you're talking about. Any place in the country costs terribly, even a shanty." "That's it, mother. Call it a shanty," put in Carol. "Mother, would you object to living in a shanty all summer if it was good and clean and you had plenty of out of doors around it?" "No, of course not, Carol, if it was perfectly respectable. I shouldn't want to take my children among a lot of low down people." "Of course not, mother," put in Shirley, "and there's nothing of that sort. It's all perfectly respectable, and the few neighbors are nice, respectable people. Now, mother, if you're willing to trust us, we'd like it if you'll just let us leave it at that and not tell you anything more about it till we take you there. George and Carol and I have all seen the place, and we think it will be just the thing. There's plenty of room and sky and a big tree and birds, and it only costs $10 a month. Now, mother, will you trust us for the rest and not ask any questions?" The mother looked in bewilderment from one to another, and seeing their eager faces she broke into a weary smile. "Well, I suppose I'll have to," she said with a sigh of doubt, "but I can't understand how any place you could get would be only that price, and I'm afraid you haven't thought of a lot of things." "Yes, mother, we've thought of everything and then some," said Shirley, stooping down to kiss her cheek. "But we are sure you are going to like this when you see it. It isn't a palace, of course. You don't expect plate glass windows, you know." "Well, hardly," said Mrs. Hollister dryly, struggling with herself to be cheerful. She could see that her children were making a brave effort to make a jolly occasion out of their necessity, and she was never one to hang back. So, as she could do nothing else, she assented. "You are sure," she began, looking at Shirley with troubled eyes. "There are so many things to think of, and you are so young." "Trust me, mother dearie," said Shirley joyously, remembering the fireplace and the electric lights. "It really isn't so bad, and there's a beautiful hill for Doris to run down, and a place to hang a hammock for you right under a big tree where a bird has built its nest." "Oh!" echoed the wondering Doris. "And could I see the birdie?" "Yes, darling, you can watch him every day and see him fly through the blue sky." "It's all right, mother," said George in a businesslike tone. "You'll think it's great after you get used to it. Carol and I are crazy over it." "But will it be where you can get to your work, both of you? I shouldn't like you to take long, lonely walks, you know," said troubled mother. Right on the trolley line, mother dear, and the difference in rent will more than pay our fare. Besides, I'm thinking of buying a bicycle from one of the fellows. He says he'll sell it for $5, and I can pay 50 cents a month. Then I could go in on my bike in good weather and save that much." This from George. "Oh, gee!" said Harley breathlessly. "Then I could ride it sometimes, too." "Sure!" said George generously. "Now," said Shirley with her commanding manner that the children called Brigadier General, "now, mother dear, you're going to put all your worries out of your head right this minute and go to sleep. Your business is to get strong enough to be moved out there. When you get there you'll get well so quick you won't know yourself. But you've got to rest from now on every minute, or you won't be able to go when the time comes. And then what will happen? Will you promise?" Amid the laughing and pleading of her children the mother promised, half smilingly, half tearfully, and succumbed to being prepared for the night. Then they all tiptoed away to the dining room for a council of war. It was still 2 weeks before they had to vacate the little brick house, plenty of time to get comfortably settled before they took their mother out there. It was decided that George and Shirley should go out the next evening, directly from their work, not waiting to return for supper, but eating a lunch downtown. Now that the place was lighted and they had been told to use the light as freely as they chose, with no charge, the question of getting settled was no longer a problem. They could do it evenings after their work was over. The first thing would be to clean house, and for that they needed a lot of things: pails, pans, brooms, mops, and the like. It would be good to take a load of things out the next day if possible. So George went out to interview the man with the moving wagon, while Shirley and Carol made out a list of things that ought to go in that first load. George came back with the report that the man could come at 4:30 in the afternoon, and if they could have the things that were to go all ready he would have his son help to load them, and they could get out to Glenside by 6 o'clock or 7 at the latest. Harley might go along if he liked and help to unload at the other end. Harley was greatly excited both at the responsibility placed upon him and at the prospect of seeing the new home. It almost made up for the thought of leaving "the fellows" and going to live in a strange place. The young people were late getting to bed that night, for they had to get things together so that Carol would not have her hands too full the next day when she got home from school. Then they had to hunt up soap, scrubbing pails, rags, brushes, and brooms. And when they went to bed at last they were much too excited to sleep. Of course there were many hindrances to their plans, and a lot of delay waiting for the cartman, who did not always keep his word, but the days passed and every one saw some little progress toward making a home out of the big barn. Shirley would not let them stay later in the evenings than 10 o'clock, for they must be ready to go to work the next morning, so of course the work of cleaning the barn progressed but slowly. After the first night they got a neighbor to sit with their mother and Doris, letting Carol and Harley come out on the car to help, and so with 4 willing workers the barn gradually took on a nice smell of soap and water. The old furniture arrived little by little and was put in place eagerly, until by the end of the first week the big middle room and the dining room and kitchen began really to look like living. It was Saturday evening of that first week, and Shirley was sitting on the old couch at the side of the fireplace resting, watching George, who was reeling out a stormy version of Chopsticks on the piano, and looking about on her growing home hopefully. Suddenly there came a gentle tapping at the big barn door, and George, as the man of the house, went to the door with his gruffest air on, but melted at once when he saw the landlord and his sister standing out in front in the moonlight. " Are you ready for callers? " asked Graham, taking off his hat in greeting. " Elizabeth and I took a spin out this way, and we sighted the light, and thought we'd stop and see if we could help any. My, how homelike you've made it look! Say, this is great!" Sidney Graham stood in the center of the big room, looking about him with pleasure. The young people had put things in apple pie order as far as they had gone. A fire was laid in the big stone fireplace, all ready for touching off, and gave a homelike, cleared up look to the whole place as if it were getting ready for some event. On each side of the chimney stood a simple set of bookshelves filled with well-worn volumes that had a look of being beloved and in daily intimate association with the family. On the top of the shelves Carol had placed some bits of bric-a-brac, and in the center of each a tall vase. Beside them were a few photographs in simple frames: a strong-faced man with eyes that reminded one of Shirley, and a brow like George's; a delicate featured, refined woman with sweet, sensitive mouth and eyes like Carol's; a a lovely little child with a cloud of fair curls.